Okay, so now we're going to find the 6 trig functions of an angle if we know a point on the terminal side of the angle. So we don't know the specific measurement of the angle. We're just going to know a point that's on the terminal side. What I would suggest that you do is just start by drawing a picture. So what I've given you here, as it said, is just a point. It's an ordered pair. So I would actually start by plotting that point. Now, as far as square root 5, I mean, we don't have to get detailed with this. You know, square root of 5 is going to be just a little bit over 2, I think about 2.2. So you could use that as your approximation for your x value. All right, so like I said, just drawing this off, we know it's going to be in the 4th quadrant. So if I went about, 2.2, and then we got to go down 3. So my point will be somewhere in this region here. Like I said, we don't have to be real exact with this. All right, so my point, or this point's on the terminal side. Now, I have no idea which direction I rotated to get that to be my terminal side. I don't know if I have a positive angle. I don't know if I have a negative angle. And like I said, it really doesn't matter in this case. Now, what you're going to want to do, though, is always draw you a right triangle. Now, I know you can draw a right triangle back this way. I just always go back to my x-axis. That's usually the best. That way you're always thinking the same way. So that means my right angle, of course, will be in this corner. So my x value, my distance from here to here, would have to be the square root 5. My y distance, the distance that I came down, is negative 3. And the distance from the origin to this point, remember, is r. Of course, I gave you the formula a while ago that you can use to find r. Now, you can use x squared plus y squared equal r squared, or you could just go straight to this formula, or this form of it, which already has r on one side by itself. So using this, so I'm going to have square root 5 squared plus negative 3 squared. So I'll have 5 plus 9, which will give me square root 14. Okay, so my x value is square root 5. My y value is negative 3. And my r value is square root 14. Okay. All right, so I started off with a picture. Actually, do I have to have the picture to work the problem? No, but sometimes some of you do better with a visual picture. If you want to know the 6 trig functions, that's the 6 ratios, that very first note that I gave you, you're going to need to know x, y, and r, because you're going to have to go through and, make all the ratios using those 3 values, okay? So if you can do it without the picture, that's fine, but I just kind of wanted you to see that this happened to be a point that is in the 4th quadrant, so sometimes we'll be in the 3rd, sometimes in the 2nd. What quadrant we're in will vary from problem to problem. Now, another thing I want to point out to you, I did say that r is always positive, okay? But like if you notice here, y is negative. Your x and your y can be negative depending on what quadrant you are in. But r will always be a positive value. All right, so finding your 6 trig functions. So I'm just going to scoot where we can just see those values there at the top. Okay, so I gave you earlier that sine theta would be y over r. So that would be negative 3 over square root 14. I'm just strictly taking these and plugging them where they're supposed to be. You do not have to rationalize these, so we're not going to worry about that. Okay, cosine is x over r. So that would be square root 5 over square root 14. Tangent theta is y over x. So that would be negative 3 over square root 5. Cosecant is r over y. Okay, so r was square root 14, y is negative 3. Secant is going to be r over x. Again, r is square root 14, x is square root 5. And last, we have cotangent, and that's going to be x over y. So that will be square root 5 over negative 3. Okay, so when you're asked for your 6 trig functions, there they are. Now I want to just point one thing out to you here. It doesn't have anything to do with the work in the problem. We're actually done with the problem. But if you remember, going back to my drawing here just a second, remember we're in the 4th quadrant. Okay, like I said, it doesn't matter whether I rotated clockwise to get to this terminal side or whether I rotated counterclockwise. Okay, what the angle being positive or negative doesn't matter, okay, in this case. Just to remember we're in the 4th quadrant. So going back to what we learned about all students take calculus, the only thing that's supposed to be positive in the 4th quadrant is supposed to be cosine and its reciprocal, which is secant. So if you'll notice, the ratio or the fraction that I have here and here is positive, and if you scan up through these other ones, see this one's negative, this one's negative, negative, negative. So only those two are positive in the 4th quadrant, everything else is negative. So that's something that would always hold true with each of these problems. Okay, same instructions, just another point here for us to look at. So this time I have the point 0, negative 3. Okay, again, I'm going to start out with a picture here. So if I were to plot this point, so this point has to be on my terminal side. So the terminal side of my angle happens to be on the y-axis. Again, which way did I rotate to get here makes no difference, okay? Now, identifying x, y, and r. Of course, x and y always just come straight from your point. I mean, we saw that on the first one. 0 is your x value, negative 3 is your y value, and we also need to come up with r. Now, you can use the formula just like I did on the previous example, but if you remember, the definition of r is that it's the distance from the origin to the point. So how far is it from the origin to this point is simply just a distance of 3. I mean, the fact that you're just going straight down to that point, you can basically just look at it and tell what r has to be. Now, it doesn't matter that I went down. Remember, r is always positive, okay? All right, so let's start with sine. So sine is y over r. So that's negative 3 over 3, which will reduce to negative 1. Always reduce when you can. Okay, cosine is x over r. So that would be 0 over 3, which is 0. Tangent is going to be y over x. So that would be negative 3 over 0, which is undefined. Remember, if you have 0 on the bottom, you have undefined. Okay, cosecant. So that's r over y. So 3 over negative 3 reduces to negative 1. Secant is r over x. So 3 over 0, which means this one's also undefined. And cotangent is x over y. So 0 over negative 3. So having 0 in your numerator would just equal 0. Okay, next. actually a similar type question that we're fixing to look at. Just the information that they give you to get started here is a little bit different, okay? You're still asked to find, actually here we're just asked to find sine, cosine, and tangent, but they give you the actual angle, and that's one thing that I did not know anything about those two previous problems. I didn't know anything about the measurement of the angle, didn't know if it was positive, if it was negative, but we do know what we're dealing with this time, and we also have to find our point on the terminal side. Now we had some problems that we had done earlier in the earlier section in which we had to find points on the terminal side, so we're going to use that information. Alright, so of course first of all it says draw it in standard position. So 315 degrees. So you will need to rotate counterclockwise because it's positive, but the terminal side is actually going to be dead center of your fourth quadrant. Okay. Now, when you pick a point on the terminal side, of course, we're going to end up closing this back up to get a triangle, a right triangle like we did earlier. Now, the fact that the terminal side cuts that quadrant perfectly in half, that's what makes finding a point a little bit easier. Of course, you're going to have to move to the right and then move down, but however many units you choose to go to the right, you have to go down the same amount. We don't all have to use the same point, okay? I would keep it simple and use the point 1, -1. That means you went to the right 1 and you went down 1. If you use 2, -2 or 3, -3, your answer will end up reducing to be the same as my answer, okay? So I know that X is 1, Y is -1, but I do have to come up with R, so we can use the formula like we did earlier. So I'm going to end up with square root 2. Okay. So now we're only finding, remember, sine, cosine, and tangent. So this is the same as it was a while ago. Let's see, actually this time, instead of using the theta symbol right there, I can actually put the 315 because I know what the measurement of my angle is this time. So sine of 315 degrees, so that would be y over r, so -1 over square root 2. Cosine of 315 degrees, so that's x over r, so therefore that would be 1 over square root 2. And now tangent of 315 degrees, so that's y over x, so that would be -1 over 1, which reduces to -1. Alright, next one that we're going to look at is -180 degrees. So again, we're going to start this one off by drawing it in standard position. Okay, so if it's a negative angle, I have to rotate clockwise this time, but this would be 90 degrees, and around here would be 180. So, of course, I went clockwise, which means this is the -180. So I need to pick a point on the terminal side. So any point that would be at that end of your x-axis would work. Again, you have a choice. I'm going to use -1, 0. You can use -2, 0, -3, 0. It'll all work. Alright, so my x value is -1. My y value is 0. Now this is one that you can just look at and figure out r because it's the distance from the origin to this point. So since this is the point -1, 0, that distance would just be 1. Okay, so sine of -180 degrees. A lot of times you'll see them put it in parentheses when it's negative, just so it's not starting to look like a minus sign. So that's y over r. So that would be 0 over 1, which is 0. cosine of negative 180 degrees. So that would be x over r. So that would be negative 1 over 1, which is negative 1. And now tangent of negative 180 degrees. So that would be y over x. So that would be 0 over negative 1, which would be 0.